This video is sponsored by Premium Sound, one of the UK's premier dealers located in Kensington, London, with an online store carrying a comprehensive inventory to cater for a variety of needs. For more details, click the link in the description. Marantz will always hold a special place in the heart of hi-fi aficionados. Some of their early amplifiers trade hands on the used market for thousands of pounds, if you can find them. So why is that? Well, it's because Sol Marantz was credited as being one of the pioneers of hi-fi. Originally, units were built in Sol's New York basement. However, it was when another industry legend, Sidney Smith, joined and production shifted to the factory at Woodside in 1953 that the Marantz company was incorporated and things really got going. The Model 1 preamp, released in 1954, was the first to feature the brand new RIAA equalization curve. RIAA stands for Recording Industry Association of America. Other curves were also included due to records at the time being produced with no standard by which they were equalized. The Model 2 power amp followed in 1956, largely a Sidney Smith design using EL34 vacuum tubes in an ultra-linear push-pull configuration. Later came a Model 3 electronic crossover and the Model 5 power amplifier, a more attractive version of the Model 2. In 1958, with the appearance of stereo LP records, previous systems were monaural, there was a Model 6 adapter to convert old amplifiers to stereo use, but the now iconic Model 7 was the first true stereo preamplifier, featuring a unique 3-stage phono preamp equalizer that became known as the Marantz circuit. Marantz has changed hands a number of times over its 70-year history. There are plenty of other products that I could talk about, but I don't want this to turn into some kind of Marantz biography. There have been a couple of characteristics that have held true to the very best Marantz products over the decades though. True to Sol's vision when hi-fi was in its infancy, and that's been good industrial design, products that people are happy to have in their home, and great sonic performance. Marantz is currently owned by Sound United, which is part of the Masima Corporation. The Model 40N is their latest amplifier. So how much of Sol's philosophy lives on today? The Marantz Model 40N retails for £2,199 in the UK. It's a chunky beast at 443 by 130 by 432 millimeters and weighing in at 16.7 kilograms. That's 17.4 by 5.1 by 17 inches and 36.8 pounds. The edge lighting subtly emphasizes the honeycomb pattern on a contoured panel that sits behind the protruding panel in this two-tier design. It's details like this, the symmetrical layout of the knobs, and the centralized porthole display that impart a feeling of elegance. The larger dial on the left is the input selector, adjacent to a source direct knob to defeat or engage the tone controls, for which there is an adjustment for the bass and treble. I know plenty of people who'll be happy to see that. There's a balance control, and the larger knob on the right is for volume adjustment. All dials are metal and have a very satisfying resistance to them. The remote control has a metal fascia that makes it weighty in hand and gives you direct access to inputs and can control other Marantz devices. The rear points to why the Model 40N is potentially a Just Add speakers hi-fi solution. Next to the Bluetooth antenna is a USB port to connect external hard drives and thumb drives. You can stream using the HEOS platform either wirelessly or via the Ethernet port. HEOS is a multi-room system that works across many Denon and Marantz hi-fi and home cinema products. Streaming services you would expect and internet radio are supported, but there's no Roon capability or Tidal Connect, so you're encouraged to stick within the HEOS ecosystem. Back to the rear panel, the HDMI ARC is a welcome feature, allowing easy connection to your TV, automatically turning the amp on and off, as well as adjusting the volume from the TV's remote control. There are coaxial and optical digital inputs to connect to additional digital sources, but no USB input. This might seem a little bit picky because this is a streaming amplifier, so what do you need a USB input for? Well, I can see a number of reasons. You may prefer the user interface of an external streamer that you want to use, you may want to connect an external computer, or something that has Roon capability, which currently the Marantz Model 40N doesn't offer. For all those reasons, a USB input would be handy, but it seldomly seems to be offered on these streaming type of amplifiers, which is a little bugbear of mine. You're not shortchanged by analog connections. The Model 40N comes with a phono input, which will accept signals from turntables with moving magnet cartridges. There are 3 line level RCA inputs, a recording output, and a subwoofer output. The power amp input can be used with external preamplifiers or to integrate with home cinema receivers. Nice to see some decent quality speaker binding posts on such a well-featured amplifier at this price too. Let's take a look at the internals of the Model 40N and start with this bottom right hand corner where we have a switch mode power supply that's used when the unit is in standby. When it's in operation, there's a linear power supply fed off this very large toroidal transformer that weighs 3.4 kilograms. Now, to give you some kind of context, that's about half the weight of a lot of amplifiers in this class. It's also nice to see that it's encased in the metal ring. That helps to reduce the noise coming off the transformer, which is by far the noisiest part of any amplifier. There's a large heatsink running pretty much all the way through this amplifier. That's also critically positioned. It's acting as shielding, further reducing the noise from the transformer to the electronics on the other side. The size of it suggests that there's a fair amount of Class A bias to the output transistors, and this amplifier is rated at 70 watts into 8 ohms and 100 watts into 4 ohms. Now if I can get into the gap here, hopefully you can see the output devices mounted to that heatsink. They're actually 4 per side, 8 in total, and that's typically a little bit more than what you ordinarily get as well. Quite often you only find 2 per side on amplifiers around this price, and that should help the Marantz Model 40N deliver a little bit more current. Now what is unusual, actually if I can get around here, hopefully you can see that board mounted vertically just off the heatsink. That is the power supply board, and normally I'd expect to find it on the other side of the heatsink. Marantz purposefully put it on this side, and the reason they do that is to keep the run from the power supply to the main board, which you can't see because it's underneath this metal casework here. I'll get to that later, but keep that run as short as possible. And they also use copper bus bars as opposed to just PCB traces and wires. That helps to lower the power supply impedance. Now the benefit of that is that under high current demand situations, for example when you're really driving the amplifier or tricky speakers at lower volumes even, that the voltage of the power supply remains stable. They use customized Elna caps. There's 2 of them, one here and one there. They're rated at 18,000 microfarads per channel. I would like to see more power supply capacitance, certainly given that there's 4 output devices. That'd just help with, quick transients where you need a lot of current very quickly, but Elna caps are top quality. Now there's a couple of technologies worth talking about. I'll post pictures as the metal shielding prevents me from looking at them directly. HDAM stands for Hyperdynamic Amplifier Modules. It's Marantz discrete preamplifier circuitry which replaces op-amps. It's designed to deliver better signal-to-noise ratio and a speedier signal transfer than what you typically get from chips. The shielding covers the sensitive electronics such as the HEOS HDMI board and the DAC phono stage. There's a top plate, middle plate and bottom plate of shielding to ensure minimal interference externally and internally between the boards. Marantz have gone to the trouble of placing a shielding bar between the phono and DAC sections. The DAC's based around a Sabre 9016 K2M chip, not the latest or greatest offering from ESS, but capable of handling files up to 192 kHz 24-bit PCM and DSD times 5.6 MHz. Yeah, this certainly isn't an amplifier that's just been thrown together. There's a lot of thought that's gone into the design and good quality parts that have been used. When the Model 40 was released, Marantz president Joel Sietsema made a comment. I'm sure I butchered that name, but just bear with me a moment. I strongly believe that you don't have to be an audiophile to enjoy the warm, rich sound. A bit of a divisive thing to say, but I think I know where he's coming from. The overall characteristic of this amplifier is a big, warm sound with strong dynamic punch. It's the kind of sound that would appeal to the right creative side of your brain rather than the left analytical side. That is a simplistic model that won't stand up to scrutiny by any neurologist worth its salt, but hopefully it gets my point across. The Marantz Model 40 throws out a wide soundstage with punchy bass, full mid-range and slightly polite highs that draw you into the music and allow you to listen all day without it turning into some kind of endurance test. It isn't the last word in neutrality or resolution, nor do I think it's intended to be. The bass isn't one note, but there are plenty of alternatives at this price that will beat it for definition. The transients in the mid-range are softened enough to give it an organic feel without it sounding too mushy, and the details are there in the highs, just dialed down to give a more relaxed presentation. I would prefer a little bit more expressiveness on top. I know there's a lot more to the Model 40N than just an amplifier, but I still think it needs to compete with the best purist amplifiers below £2,000. The Exposure 2510 is about as purist an amplifier as you can get for £1,700, effectively just a power amplifier with a volume pot and a built-in phono stage. To continue my rather crude analogy, the Exposure 2510 has the perfect left side, right side brain balance in my opinion. Less coloration whilst maintaining warmth, tighter bass, crisper mids, and more revealing of micro details and textures throughout the frequency range, including on top. The Exposure doesn't have everything its own way though. The Marantz has a bolder presentation, partially due to a wider soundstage and better dynamics. It's as if it's the Exposure with its hair let down and really going for it. What you get is less pretty, but certainly fun. If you like dynamics, then you should love the Wilsington R8 with upgraded PS Vane tubes, which offers even more muscularity than the Marantz. Yours for about £1,500 with the tube upgrade. There's a lot more similar than disparate between the musical presentation of these two amplifiers. Ultimately, it is the Wilsington that comes out on top with more detail across the board and that 3D holographic soundstage that the best tube amplifiers are known for. But not everybody will want to live with tubes, and the Marantz has a very good internal DAC and streamer that need to be factored into the equation. So let's get on to that. It was pretty straightforward to set up the streamer, download the HEOS app, in my case from the Apple App Store, and follow a series of instructions. This involved selecting the device, pairing my iPad to the Model 40N and the remote control, finally connecting it to my network, which I use wirelessly. I don't claim to be the greatest streaming pundit. If I really like an album, I tend to buy the CD and rip it onto my hard drive or download a high-res file if I can. And that's because I still like the idea of physically owning media. I do spend quite a bit of time listening to Tidal though, either to discover new music, and some of my library is on Tidal. I found the HEOS app to be simple and easy to use. The menu system has 3 tabs. The first tab shows you all your HEOS devices. I only had the one, but you can have multiple devices playing different music in different rooms or the same music everywhere. The second tab is where all your music comes together. Some people will desire a more sophisticated user interface with the ability to customize menus, more metadata, but I found it sufficient for my purposes. I would like the album art to load a little bit quicker though. However, I was able to plug in my 2TB Western Digital USB drive and access over 12,000 tracks on my library without a problem. That can be temperamental with some other players. The third tab shows you what's playing now. It allows you to adjust the volume, pause, play, skip tracks forward and backwards, and create playlists. I found the internal ESS DAC to be extremely well suited to this amplifier. I hooked up my Denafrips Venus 2, fed by my Auralic Aries Mini streamer. That did offer a little bit more detail and refinement, but the more I listened, the more I preferred the internal DAC. It just allowed the carefree personality of this amplifier to come through a little bit better. Now, in the right system, the Venus is the superior DAC, but synergy can be a strange and elusive thing, and that brings me nicely on to speaker pairings. My Proact Response 1 SEs have embarrassed many amplifiers in this class that have struggled to open up the soundstage. No such problem with the Model 40, with the soundstage spread way beyond the speakers left and right. There was also a touch of soundstage depth, so not your typical ESS DAC presentation, but it was also clear that Marantz wasn't able to extract enough information from the recording to get the Proacts to show their best. It was a similar story with the Minuet SEs, wide soundstage, warm, rich sound, but holding the Dalis back a touch in their resolving ability. On paper, the Amphion Argon 1s should be an ideal match for the Marantz Model 40. They have a tight bass, drier mid and extended top end to sonically balance things nicely. Yes, balanced it was, but that boogie factor, that is the Model 40's thing, that was also subdued, so it isn't a pairing that I would choose. The ELAC Unify Reference UBR62 speakers have just arrived, but I couldn't help to hook them up and have a quick listen. It's a much less expensive speaker than the others that I've mentioned here, so I'm still readjusting my expectations, but that pairing could work. I'll report back in the ELAC review. I said at the beginning of this video that Sol Marantz products centered around two values: good industrial design married to great sound, that made his amplifiers a pleasure to live with. On the first score, the Model 40 has it covered. It's an elegant, substantial, comprehensive machine with a well-suited internal DAC, robust and useful streaming platform. The second one is up for some debate. If you go down the purist multi-box road, the likelihood is it will lead you to higher fidelity. There are even some single box solutions at this price that will extract more detail from your recordings. It's down to that old cliched word, musicality. To most people that means trading a little bit of sonic precision for a warmer, richer, more forgiving sound. That's what you have here, and I suspect that's exactly what Marantz was going for. The overall package is very compelling. The Marantz Model 40N gets a highly recommended from this channel. I'm very grateful that there's so much choice in hi-fi these days, purist solutions for the uncompromising, as well as convenience-orientated designs that still offer very good sound. I'd like to know where you sit in the purist versus convenience debate. Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comment section. All that remains for me to say is if you like what I do, I'm sure you know what to do by now. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. I will urge you to check out my Patreon. There's a couple of consultancy tiers there that you can access if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also quite a few benefits to joining the ABA club, including a very active WhatsApp group and periodic video calls that we have. But for today, for now, a British Audiophile signing off.